Yeah, welcome to class this morning. Quickly, we want to look at some points in science. The first point we'll be looking at is irrigation. What you can see now is an irrigation equipment. And what does irrigation do? Provides water for the plants, especially during dry season. During dry season, it's an artificial method of storing water so that plants can be provided with it when there is no natural rainfall. So when next you see such a question like the one that's going to show up now, just know that it's irrigation. Like the question says, the artificial method of storing large quantity of water for plant use during dry season. It is irrigation. Is the answer. Because some of us picked the wrong one. Next up, you can see an iron bar be painted and the iron looks rusted, and painting it is going to make it look better. So the major work of paint on the iron is not just to make it look beautiful, it also helps to prevent rust. Whenever an iron is painted, it helps to prevent rust. Yeah, that brings us to the next slide where you can see a seed in the soil growing up, simply germination. Now, the first aspect of the diagram there is the seed in the soil. The second aspect is the beginning of the germination. So, germination begins in the embryo, like you can see there. From the embryo, germination starts, then the seed coat starts breaking away for the cotyledon to take position. And once that is done, the shoot is out. And that's how plants or seeds germinate from the soil. This is another important aspect we're going to be looking at, fertilization. Most of the time, we tend to mix it up with pollination. Pollination is simply the transfer process. It has nothing to do with the coming together of the male and the female gametes. Pollination simply means the movement of the pollen grain from the anther to the stigma. Now, when it comes to fertilization, it is the coming together now of the pollen grains and the ovule. The fertilization is the coming together of the male and the female gametes, the infusion of both of them, that is fertilization. Do not mix that up. Pollination is different from fertilization. Pollination is simply the transfer. But why the coming together or the infusion of the male and the female gamete of the flower is called fertilization. So when both the pollen grain and the female gamete comes together, that is fertilization, not pollination. Pollination is simply the transfer, while fertilization is the infusion or the coming together of both the male and the female gamete of the flower. Pollination is just a facilitator, something that facilitates fertilization. That's the major purpose of pollination, so that there can be fertilization. That's it, all right? So fertilization in plant is a process that involves the fusion of the male gamete and the female gamete. Okay, so let's move over to another. We've talked about this over time, talking about fruit and seed formation. Please note that the ovary develops into fruits. Okay, the ovary wall becomes the rest of the fruit. Okay, the ovary develop into fruit, while the ovule that fertilize is the seed. The ovary is the fruit. So whenever you see a question like that, always know what the ovary does and what the ovule does. The ovary is the fruit and the ovule is the seed. That takes us to another, drupe. Drupe. Now the fruits that are in the drupe family are simply fleshy fruits that usually contains a single seed. A single seed. You see, while mango can be seen as a drupe and not tomatoes, because tomatoes has a lot of seed and mango has just one seed. Which brings us to the question. The figure above are different fruits. Which of them is a drupe? Simply, it's mango. It can't be banana. Banana has no seed. And tomatoes has a lot of seed. So the correct answer is 3 only. Mango it is. The only fruit there with a seed. Not just seed, but one seed. Are we good? Now let's look at this carefully. The features of sound do not include. It can travel 1/3 of a kilometer in 1 second. Now the thing is, sound travels. Sound does what? Travels. And when sound is traveling, sound need particles to travel. Now in a vacuum, there is no particle. There's no solid, there's no liquid, there's not even gas. So there is no particle in a vacuum. There are no particles there. So sound can't travel in a vacuum, all right? That's what makes that the answer. So the features of sound do not include it can travel through a vacuum. Next up is a follow-up to what we've just looked at. The fruit is usually formed by the, you can tell me? Correct, ovary forms the fruits. Yeah, we've also talked about the growth of seed. The growth of seed takes place in the, you can tell me the answer. Yeah, we said embryo. Embryo is where the growth of seed takes place. Keep that in your jotter. Let's look at more questions. Water may be rendered healthy by the following method, except this question was kind of confusing to a lot of us. Now, making water free from poisonous chemical can work. Making water rich in oxygen can work. Removing deadly microorganisms, of course, will work. Removing living organisms present in the water. And lastly, removing large particles. Now, if you look at all of them, you discover that removing living organism present in the water does not make the water clean at all, because the dead animals or the living organisms must have polluted the water. So you remove the organism. What about the pollution in the water? So that makes that the answer. We've also talked about this before. The combination of male and female sex cell of the flower is known as what? Fertilization. Fertilization. And lastly, in making of soap, which of the following is not one of the methods used? The simple answer is adding foams to the ashes. The soap makes foams. So you can't add foams, or rather, foams that are not been made to an ashes. You don't do that. You can collect ashes from the cocoa pod. Of course, that's a step. Add water to the ashes, then adding potash to the ashes, but not adding foams to the ashes. So that makes adding foams to the ashes the answer, a method that is not used in making soap. Thank you. Bye.